and thank you for the kind invitation to participate in. My subject is connected with a few individual projects in the Institute of Art Studies. First was about the Paleologan icons in Bulgarian collections. The second was the two-sided icons in Bulgarian collections. And during these investigations, 10 years, I made many changes in the exactly dating of these icons. And now I will present a result of the investigation about the three Paleologan icons from Neseber, Mesembria, which consequence after that to change the dating of the painting of the icons. All these three icons in the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of 12th century, are in the iconostasis of the new metropolis of Saint Stephen, but originally they are from other churches. Thanks to the archive photos of Georgi Traichev and Vladimir Zarkevich, which was published by Ivan Vanev in his book, and the preserved documentation, we have this information about the provenance of the icons and about a revampment of an icon which disappeared in the years. Here I would like to mention that during the Second World War, Sofia was ruined by bombing from American and English, and the archive of the National Archaeological Museum mostly was burned. And we are happy that something from this archive was preserved. After the victory of Tsar Ivan Alexander over the Byzantine troops at the Battle of Rusu Castro, July 1731, Neseber and other towns south of it were again incorporated in the territory of Bulgaria Kingdom, and the Neseber Church was again part of the diocese of the Târnău Patriarchate until 1366. The great Bulgarian hesychast Saint Theodosius Târnovski, together with his disciple Saint Romil Dinsky, also spent time in Neseber as well as the nearby monasteries. During this period, Neseber became the first ecclesiastical and military administrative center in the Black Sea region. The city has home to representatives of several royal and aristocratic families who were connected with the ruling dynasties in Bulgaria and Byzantium. During this period of cultural and spiritual flourishing, according to the preserved documents, numerous churches and monasteries were built and renovated with the donations of the Bulgarian royal family of Tsar Ivan Alexander, as the monastery of Eleusa, Christ Pantocrator, Saint Archangels Michael and Gabriel, Saint John Liturgetus, and others. The presence and special treatment of the family of Tsar Ivan Alexander is also supported by the fact that the widow of Michael Asen, Maria Irina Paleologina, and daughter of the Byzantine Emperor Andronicus III Paleologus, at some time took the monastic name Ataisa in the same monastery of Eleusa in Neseber. The first icon revampment I will present it here is very, very famous, published in the 19th century. On this silver gilded background, there are three inscriptions and another 4 inscriptions on the Maphorion of Theotokos. Here is the first inscription, from which we know that the monastery was renovated and the revampment was donated during the reign of Tsar Ivan Alexander and his son Michael Asen. The next inscription is with exactly dating in the year 6850, 1341, 1342, me, the uncle of the King Alexander, renovated the church of Holy Virgin Eleus. The third inscription is about other donation to the same monastery: golden gospel, silver candle, 3 podeas, epitaphius, epitrachilio, etc. And about the professor which is writing about the cursing in the inscriptions in the churches. The end of this inscription is cursing about if somebody took these donations. The fourth inscriptions on the Maphorion of Theotokos is about the donator, which is the same uncle, Samuel. Here we have the name of the donator, Samuel, uncle of the Tsar Ivan Alexander. According to Theodor Gerasimov, Samuel was a monk in the monastery, and according to other researchers, he was a prominent figure in the Ternur court. The icon was repainted in 18th century. The original painting may be contemporary with the cover for 1341, but it could be earlier. The iconographic type of odigitria, in which the Virgin Mary is depicted, but the inscription is Virgin Eleusa. This difference between the iconography and inscription on the cover could mean that the icon of the Virgin Odigitria was painted earlier. The revetment, or rather the revetments, are made up of different plates with different weights and technique. It is possible that the parts of the earlier ornaments before 1341 were used for the upper frame, the left frame, and the lower part of the right frame. But in the present study we assume that they were placed together with the silver background with the inscriptions. In the upper 2 corners of the frame are placed squared gilded plates with the symbols of Evangelist Luke and Evangelist John. And also we have in the high relief the 2 medallions with the images of Archangel Michael and Archangel Gabriel, which are the only few testimonies of the style and iconography of the goldsmith works of the 14th century in Bulgaria. On the right frame is mounted rectangular plates with the scenes of the entrance of the Virgin in the temple, and the Joseph with Holy Virgin. The other fragments are from the late period, 16th-18th century. For the present subject are especially important the silver plates on the frame, because the same are used also for the other icons under discussion. On the same iconostasis in the new metropolis of San Stefan was also the 2-sided icon of Holy Virgin, signed as Gorgo Epikos, in the iconographic type of Eleusa with prophets, and on the other side Christ Pantocrator with prophets. On the side with the Holy Virgin then was a silver revetment, but it disappeared somewhen, and somehow we don't know. About it, evidence only by archive photos and publications from 1925 by Krstyo Miatev and later publication of Andrei Grabar in 1975. He said that the revetment now is not in the museum when he saw it before the Second World War. We judge for the photographs from 1920 by Georgi Traichev and Vladimir Zarkevich from the archive of National Archaeological Institute with museums in Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. The revetment covers the entire icon, the background, the garments, the upper frame. Only the faces of the Virgin and the Infant, as well as the house figures of the 2 archangels, are visible. The nimbus of the Virgin is placed separately, made in the repoussé technique, densely decorated with a mesh of ornaments and larger boutons, semispheres in high relief. Individual places are also placed in the repoussé on the background above the shoulders and around the heads and the nimbus of the archangels. On the upper plate, a frame are placed ribbons decorated in repoussé with spheres, geometric ornaments, and plant ornaments. André Grabar, in his classification of the precious revêtements, attributed it in the so-called archivi group and dating it about the 14th century. Krstomiatev believes that the silver strips on the frame are also old, as he has seen identical ones on the cover of the icon of Christ Pantocrator and on the icon of the Virgin Eleusa on the same iconostasis. That is the other publication. It is now the icon, and from the other side, Christ Pantocrator. Here I would like to make a parenthesis. This two-sided icon with Virgin Eleusa and Christ Pantocrator, and another one with Virgin Eleusa and Christ Pantocrator, also from Mesembria, are only the two examples of this iconographic type of the two-sided icons in all the Bizantium. But we have two examples of this iconography, and they are logically connected with the famous monastery of Eleus. The next revêtement is from the earliest icon on wood in Bulgaria, Christ Pantocrator, from the end of 11th, beginning of 12th century, with few painted layers. In no publications, including Grabar, the revêtement was dated 14th century. In the previous publications, I discussed about the silver-gilded nimbus on the plates, on the shoulder, and the nimbus because of their unique decoration and royal symbolism of the ornamentations. Here is the icon. They were created especially for this icon. The revêtement on the garment of Christ was not created specially for this icon, but it's composed of various size and decorative silver bands. This type of revêtements consist of individual bands are usually used to cover the background or the frame of the icons, not the vestments, the garments. Here you are on this slide, it is a contemporary condition of the icon. The silver revêtement was removed on a new base, not on the original. The face of Pantocrator is from the second painting layer from the end of 16th century. Now I would like to pay attention to the garments of Christ created from different silver and silver gilded ribbons. Some of them are identical with the silver ribbons on the frame of the icon of Virgin Eleusa, and others are identical with those on the frame of Virgin Gorgo-Epikuros. Judging by the identical silver ribbons, the placing of a precious revêtement on the icon of Christ Pantocrator can be associated with the same period of cultural uplift and special treatment of Tsar Ivan Alexander to the churches in Neseber. This fact also was connected with the Turnovo court and family of Tsar Ivan Alexander by himself. Here I would like to say that also in my last publications from last year, I was dating the revêtement about 14th century, mid-14th century, and the painting second half of 14th century. Now I would like to be more precise, more exactly, and till now I will date all these revêtements, 1340s, 1350s, and also the paintings was painted from the same time. Here is the details from the two revêtements. Above you can see the archive photo, detail from the archive photo of the disappeared revêtement. Now it's from, and here is a fragment, details from the other two icons, of Eleusa and Christ Pantocrator, with the other ribbons were also identical. The image of Christ Pantocrator from the original painting from the 11th-12th century is related. Here is another example of another revampment. Directed his especially to the nation activity of the Alexios First Komnenos in Nesebar, to which they worked the imperial symbolism and some unique iconographic elements. If you assume that the icon was donated by Emperor Alexios First Komnenos, it is logically as a symbolic act to put a precious cover on it by another ruler in another era. The unique ornament of the nimbus has a heraldic royal symbolism associated with the imperial court. As logical consequence, we have to date it also about 1340s, 1350s. But the exactly dating of the revampments leads to the dating of the painting. At the same time, on the other side of the same icon was painted the scene of crucifixion of Christ, and so it becomes a two-sided processional icon worn during the procession of Great Friday. The scene of crucifixion we have to date also 1340s, 1350s. But the same atelier painted other two-sided icons with crucifixions, or more icons, at the Black Sea coast, which we have to date it also to the same decade. Here is the next crucifixion for the two-sided icon from Nesebar. Here is details. It's clear that they are very similar. And another not well preserved and overpainted two-sided icon, which was recently published in a big catalog of the Church Museum you saw here and you took it. It's a known icon. And now we have exactly dating from another three icons. Here I would like to go a little bit back. Now, still the depiction of the crucifixion on the site of Christ Pantocrator will link to the time and placement to the revampments 1342. Thanks to the archive photos, the lost revampment, we can conclude that the family of Tsar Alexander make the donation and has the practice to donate icons with precious revampments, and this practice was popular in this period in Mesembria. Here I would like to also to add the precious icon cover of the icon of St. George the Assuritis with unknown provenance. But in my first publication, I put the hypothesis of Nesebar as a provenance as the leading. Thus, the large silver gilded covers of icons from Nesebar become four. This revampment has different plates from different periods. The earlier and similar to the other under discussion are on the background. The body of the saint is from the 16th century and late plates from the 19th century. All these revampments are diverse as whole, but show similarities in workmanship and distinguishing by wealth and decorative ornamentation, and in the some respect have no parallels in Byzantium. This naturally raises the question of whether there was a studio in Mesembria, Nesebar, where they were carved for the most reverted icons in the city, or whether they were imported to order from Thessaloniki or Constantinople. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for the very nice presentation.
Thank you. The next speakers are Elena Firea and Ivan Bilyarski. tracing the journeys of Saint Paraskeva's relics, documents, texts, images.
How do you put this full screen?
So, thank you. I'd like to first thank the organizers of this already cherished event. I'm very proud to be here again, and I thank you for the kind invitation. This is a joint presentation. Professor Ivan Biliarski and me have worked on the topic for several years, but unfortunately today he's not able to join me because he's abroad. So I take full credit for all errors and misunderstandings and misinterpretations of this presentation.
Very noble, won't work. Please.
What to do? So, I shall proceed. Saint Paraskeva of Epivates, or Saint Petka as she is known among Bulgarians, Serbs and Romanian, is one of the most venerated saints in southeastern Europe up to this day. A pious hermitess of Greek origin who lived at the turn of the 10th and 11th century and was originally buried in the Holy Apostles' Church in Epivates, near Constantinople, Saint Paraskeva enjoyed only a local cult in Byzantium. After the transfer of her relics to Turnovo in 1231, her veneration acquired a strong political character as divine defender of the capital and the holy patroness of the ruling family. In a special study, Ivan Biliarski has convincingly shown that after the arrival of her relics in the capital of the Second Bulgarian Empire, the southern Slavs and the Romanians venerated Paraskeva as a special protector of the city and the state, similar to the role played by the Theotokos in relation to Constantinople. Due to this special feature, the cult later spread across all Balkans, while her relics traveled extensively between the 13th and the 17th century against the background of the growing Ottoman occupation. Within this larger context, the purpose of the present paper is to trace the last journeys of Saint Paraskeva's relics and their significance as reflected in one contemporary visual source. It is an engraving by the Ruthenian artist Ilia for the famous Carte Românească de Învățătură, the first collection of sermons on saints' lives translated into Romanian by the Metropolitan Varlaam and printed in Iași in 1643. As head of the Moldavian Church, its author had been directly involved in the transfer of the relics of Saint Paraskeva to Iași only 2 years earlier. The image shows a holy woman at the center, crowned, sitting on a majestic throne, and surrounded by 9 narrative episodes from her life. Among these, 3 translatio scenes can be identified in the upper and lower registers, which will be the focus of our analysis. Which relics transfer do they represent, and what is the significance of this particular selection? In order to answer this question, it is necessary to discuss the engraving within the previous tradition of representation of Saint Paraskeva, but also by relying on inscriptions and other archival material without which the image would lose its meaning. Before addressing these specific issues, let me briefly refer again to the subsequent journeys of Saint Paraskeva's relics. The first transfer took place after the Great Battle of Klokotnica in 1230, when Bulgarian Tsar Jonathan II became the ruler of almost the entire Balkan Peninsula. The events are well documented and thoroughly studied in previous historiography. The translatio to Turnovo and the ensuing spreading of her veneration among the Slavs prompted the creation of a huge literary tradition, translations from Greek, as well as redaction of an original Vita, panegyrics, and services in Slavonic. Of course, Patriarch Euthemius wrote an extensive Vita and office for Saint Petka, and this was decisive. In this writing, he detailedly described the transfer of the relics to the Bulgarian capital. And it became, of course, very popular and widespread throughout the late Middle Ages. The second journey of the relics occurred after the fall of Turnovo in 1393, when the holy body was conveyed to another Bulgarian city, Vidin, where Tsar John Sratsimir, the last ruler of Asen dynasty, was still in power. This translatio should be studied in correspondence with the third one, from Vidin to the Serbian lands, which took place after the fall of John Sratsimir, following the catastrophe of the Crusaders' army in 1396. Through the efforts and personal implication of Princess Milica and Despot Stefan Lazarevich, the relics were transferred first to Kruševac and then to Belgrade for the sacralization of their political centers and the divine protection of the Serbian state. For both of them, the Serbian rulers needed the Sultan's permissions, and both accounts were accounted by Gregory Zamblak in an oration on the translation, which he added like an appendix to the hagiography of Saint Paraskeva written by Patriarch Euthemius. After the death of Despot Lazarevich, Stefan Lazarevich in 1427, the city of Belgrade was ceded to the Hungarians and remained about a century in their hands. On the 29th of August 1521, it was conquered by the Ottomans, and so a fourth travel of the relics occurred. Sultan Suleiman I and his army took them from Belgrade to Constantinople, together with the relics of Saint Theophano and the miraculous icon of Our Lady. This was not a proper translatio reliquarum, so we need to dwell more on the significance of the event, as it was reflected in several Serbian and Venetian sources. In the combined text of the Chronicle, Stojanović edition, we find reference to the conquest of the city Belgrade, but no mention of the transfers of relics. Only 2 chronicles refer to this event, and they are presented as part of the attack against Sirmium and the surrounding region. Then the episode of the Sultan relocating the 3 holy objects to Constantinople was related in a Latin chronicle written for Despot Georg Branković. Another, please excuse the length of this slide. So another significant element is to be found in the more or less contemporary author, Ludovico Stubero, who relates that after the capture of Belgrade, Suleiman decided to relocate a part of the Serbian population from there to Constantinople. And it was the Christians who, forced to leave their homes, asked permission to take with them the relics of Saint Paraskeva. So according to this testimony, the initiative of the transfer belonged to the Christians and not to the Ottoman Sultan. And finally, the last journey of Saint Paraskeva, as I told, took place in 1641 from Constantinople to Iași, capital of Moldavia, at the request and great expense of Prince Vasile Lupu. The circumstances of the affair are well known in the existing literature. The prince received the holy body from the Patriarchy as a compensation for paying back in full its huge financial debts. But he additionally spent a considerable amount of money in order to obtain the approval of the Ottoman authorities for the transportation of the holy body and their safe journey to Moldavia. Once they reached their final destination, they were solemnly greeted in a ceremonial adventus, described as such in various sources, and deposited in the 3 Holy Hierarchs' Church. And this was the most recent and important religious foundation of Vasile Lupu, meant to become his personal necropolis. The church was built only several years earlier, in 1639, and was still in the process of receiving its lavish decoration when the relics arrived. My colleague Elisabetta spoke about some of this decoration yesterday. According to more or less contemporary travelers' account, they were placed under the relics, were placed under a special canopy in the nave next to the sanctuary, where they remained until 1884, when extensive restoration work began and the relics were moved to the Metropolitan See. Unfortunately, precisely because of this intrusive restoration, the original setting of the shrine of Saint Paraskeva in Iași has not survived. A long inscription, again long texts, I'm sorry, installed at the base of the canopy and preserved in a later copy, states that the relics arrived in Moldavia on June 13, sent there by the ecumenical patriarch Parthenius I and accompanied by 3 high hierarchs from Constantinople. More important to our topic, the inscription states that this was their 3rd translatio. The same erroneous information can be found in the inscription of the translatio seen in the engraving by Ilia. Moreover, the other 2 inscriptions accompanying the transfer of the relics identified them first as the one to Trnovo on the upper register by Tsar Jonathan II, and second, the relocation of the relics to Constantinople by Sultan Suleiman, Selim in the inscription. And this, to my knowledge, is the only extant visual rendition of the episode in post-Byzantine art. This particular association is surprising. So, the intentional obliteration of the other transfers is surprising as well, since we have already seen that the relics have traveled much more before their final journey to Yash. It is hard to believe that such a knowledgeable man as Metropolitan Varlam, who was directly involved in the transfer of the relics and was definitely responsible for the selection of illustration for his book, did not know the earlier history of the relics. So why did he choose this particular selection of scenes, and to what purpose? In order to better understand Varlam's motivation, a brief overview of Sant Paraskeva's previous tradition of representation becomes necessary. So the extant visual material has been thoroughly studied through different perspectives by art historians such as Elka Bakalova, Alexander Rogov, Miroslav Kruk, Margarita Kuyumdzieva, and more recently Emil Dragnev, and I'm sure others. But the translatio scenes have never been the subject of the comprehensive comparative analysis. They were included in several narrative cycles, starting with the 15th century. Such representations are not numerous, and they do not vary in terms of iconographical choices. Margarita Kuyumdzieva has pointed out, rightfully, that it's more than reasonable to assume that after the arrival of the relics in Trnovo, the veneration enjoyed by Paraskeva there must have acquired a significant visual dimension. But unfortunately, no written or visual sources have survived from present-day Bulgaria. And similarly, no representations are known from medieval Serbia either. Maybe you can help me find more examples. The earliest pictorial hagiographical cycles that I know come from a group of 15th, 16th century Polish Ruthenian icons, estimated by scholars to amount to more than a dozen. They are large Vita icons depicting a standing portrait of the saint in the middle and various episodes from the life on her margin. Numerous of these small episodes refer to the relics, to the history of her earthly remains, from their initial burial to the later miraculous discovery of the body, their proper inhumation in the Church of the Holy Apostles and the Epivates, and finally their transfer to Trnovo. For instance, the icon now preserved in the Historical Museum of Sanoku dates from the 16th century, and 7 out of 10 narratives episodes refers to the history of the relics and not to the proper events of Saint Paraskeva's life. So even if the iconographical selection may vary from one icon to the other, the translatio scene to Trnovo is never missing. And moreover, this is usually given visual prominence within these narrative cycles as a conclusive scene, as you can see in this icon now kept in the National Museum in Warsaw. So, this is the only translatio, proper translatio reliquarium depicted in the Polish-Lithuanian territory. But a similar situation is to be found in the Moldavian mural cycles dedicated to Saint Paraskeva in the 16th century, long before the transfer of her relics to Iași. Elka Bakalova has dedicated a special study to these frescoes, and more recently Emil Dragnev. Both the hagiographical cycle in Arbore and the one from the Episcopal Church, this is again Arbore, and the one from the Episcopal Church in Roman contain several episodes referring to the relics, each concluding with 2 successive deposition or translatio scene. First, the one to the Saint Apostle Church in Epivates, when the saint was actually removed from her original unworthy burial place to properly be reburied in the church of her hometown, and respectively the transfer of 1231 to Trnovo. The scenes in Arbore are barely visible and impossible to identify without the inscription, while the frescoes from Roman clearly juxtapose the 2 mentioned translations very nicely and clearly, and this is the last one, the translatio to Trnovo. Okay, the textual sources are short versified prologue for Arbore and the Vita written by Patriarch Euthymius for Roman. And this explains why the translation to Turnovo is always the last scenes of the narratives, even though it was notorious at the time that Saint Paraskeva's relics were no longer in Turnovo. The account of Gregory Zamblak about their transfer to Belgrade was well known to Moldavia, as well as the information about their ancient transfer to Constantinople in 1521, and the passage from the Chronicle of Bishop Macarie, shepherd of the church in Roman and most probably commissioner of its frescoes, clearly proves that. So why then the only transfers of the relics depicted in church decoration were the ones mentioned in the short version of Euthemius' text? Was it because, as Maria Vasilevich recently suggested, they had not enjoyed the ceremonial advantage in the complicated context of the Ottoman occupation and were therefore not suitable to be depicted in church decoration? We believe that the explanation lies somewhere else, namely in the fact that more than a century before the saint's body was brought to Moldavia, the iconographers of the two churches, as well as the one of the historiated icons for that matter, were not interested in presenting a realistic and complete history of the relic's journey, but illustrating a visual hagiography based on the authoritative text of Patriarch Euthymius. May I have 5 minutes more? I've heard the sound. Because now I'm getting to the engraving.
I didn't say anything.
So,
I don't know what is wrong with this.
thank you.
When it goes to zero, it starts beeping.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So things were quite different in the case of the engraving inserted in Metropolitan Varlam's Gospel Homiliary. As already mentioned, the image illustrates no less than 3 transfers of the relics. In the top register, the one to Turnovo, and 2 scenes from the bottom depict the transfer of the relics from Belgrade to Constantinople by the Sultan, Suleiman, and respectively from Tsarigrad to Iași by Voivod Vasile Lupu. Please note the fact that visually, the engraver marked the distinction between the 2 transfers of the relics to Turnovo and Iași, depicted like a proper ceremonial translatio reliquarium, with the hierarchs holding the chase and on their shoulders and the political ruler devoutly participating to the procession, while in the Ottoman one, the relics are carried less solemnly in a backboard identified with the simple word, moshi, with the Sultan riding his horse in glory in front of them. This is rather a triumphal advantage of the victorious Sultan returning to his capital in glory, and accompanied by the relics of Saint Paraskeva as a symbol of his enhanced power. Such an unusual selection of scenes can only be explained by thinking of the particular conditions of the production of the illustration. In her recently published catalogue of Ilya's works, Oksana Yurshichin-Smith has shown that the closest analogy to the engraving in the Gospel Homiliary is an icon in the church of Saint Paraskeva in Lviv, itself restored by Voivod Vasile Lupu, the church. The most notable difference is the inclusion of the 3 additional narratives episodes relating to the relics in the engraving by Ilya. He was not responsible for this addition, I am sure, but the author of the book himself, Metropolitan Varlam, who had personally participated in the last transfer of the relics to Iași. Therefore, the illustration was an eyewitness testimony somehow, but also compensated for the fact that in the text, the hagiography of Saint Paraskeva omits to report the transfer of the relics to Iași. This could be explained most probably because the text has been collected and prepared for printing before the actual event occurred in 1641, and we have a letter sent to the Tsar which attests to this. All the 3 episodes concerning the relics were meant to compensate for this translatio narrative. And the author of the book, Varlam himself, probably felt he owed to his readers in 1643. The need to emphasize the provenance of the relics, and this is a necessary topos in any translatio account, you need to say where the relics come from, also explains the unusual inclusion of the episode of the transfer of the relics to Constantinople by the Sultan. But this association also implies a more complex statement of authority, since the engraving is showing Saint Paraskeva traveling from Turnovo via Constantinople to Iași. In visual terms, the last journey of the relics is clearly associated to the Turnovo moment, tradition, suggesting a certain continuity. As it happened before, Saint Paraskeva was definitely brought to Moldova as a palladium of the new capital and of the princely power by Vasile Lupu. However, she was brought from Constantinople after complex negotiation with the Patriarchy and with the Sultan's approval. The intermediary representation of Ottoman transfer indicates the exact place where the relics came from before their last transfer to Moldova. And in a way, they justify it. And to conclude, as Maria Vasilievich has shown in a recent article on translaciones of saints' relics in the late Balkans in the context of the growing Ottoman power, most of the relics now were purchased by Christian rulers with the Sultan permission, but without affecting the significance of their sacralizing presence at the new destination. By portraying the Sultan carrying the saint to Constantinople, the image indicates not only the relic's place of origin at the time, but also that the Sultan approved for their last journey. And this was important for Vasile Lupu. But nonetheless, the different manner of representation, compared to the more ceremonial transfers to Turnovo and Iași, suggest that only after the transfer to Iași, they received the proper veneration. Thank you very much.
Thank you also for an excellent presentation. Now,
Thank you for the time.
You're welcome. We call to the stand none other than Andrea Babuin. He will speak to us about Saint Nicholas and the miracle of the wheat in a 14th century tempera panel. We can't wait.
Thank you. Thanks the organizers once again for accepting my candidature and for their exquisite hospitality. Full screen. So, St. Nicholas was a 4th century bishop of Myra in Lycia, in South Asia Minor. We possess very scanty information about him. According to a 6th century Vita, he saved 3 of Constantine's generals from execution. By the end of the 9th century, his figure merged with the one of another Nicholas, the 6th century abbot Nicholas of Sion, who was responsible for a number of miracles, including the stilling of storms at sea. So the first Nicholas of Myra is not responsible for any seafaring miracles. Nicholas began to be celebrated in important works of art in Constantinople, while numerous encomia and hymns were written in his honor. His cult was particularly felt among the crews of the imperial fleet, and by the 11th century had spread both in Western Europe and in Kievan Rus. This is the first icon we will see today. It's coming from Sinai, showing various scenes from his life. It's a Vita icon. It's amidst the earliest preserved works of art depicting Nicholas. Please notice how, even though at least 3 important miracles attributed to the saint are connected with seafaring and ships, here just one scene is dedicated to this theme. 1 out of 20. Moreover, it depicts a diminutive rowboat and not a sailing ship, as we would expect, since all these naval miraculous interventions took place in the open sea and were therefore probably connected with ships of a certain tonnage. Other icons, the one on the left is again a Vita icon, but even though it's coming from Cyprus, a place that should have a close relationship with the sea, only one scene out of 15 depicts a boat. And now it's almost completely obliterated. You can see the scene where the yellow arrow is. The lack of naval imagery in the stories of the saint is a leitmotif common to all Orthodox art. When boats appear, they are always of diminutive dimensions, mainly simple rowboats. Actually, the first two-masted ship, the first big ship appearing in Orthodox art connected with the saints' iconography will appear only in the late 15th century in Patmos. In the West, otherwise, the presence of naval imagery is much more pronounced. We can see it in the icon on the right. One of the oldest Western preserved works of art depicting Saint Nicholas, and we can already appreciate 3 scenes depicting both. Now we reach the central theme of the day. The lower panel of a tempera painting preserved in the Uffizi galleries in Florence and coming from the Florentine church of San Procolo sports a scene based on Jacopo da Varagine Legenda Aurea. It's a text written around 1259, 1266 with later additions. Where we can see 2 ships unload their cargo of grain in the port of Andriachi, and the cargo is directed to the famine-stricken city of Myra. The saint will perform a miracle, and the ships, initially bound for Alexandria, will fill up again with corn and reach their final destination with their holds once again full. You can see the angels on top that are filling again the holds of the ship. A similar miracle is already related in a Byzantine text written 400 years before, the Legenda Aurea, in the Encomium Methodi, dated around 1880-60. And according to this earlier Byzantine source, while in Myra there was a severe famine, Nicholas appeared to the sailors of 5 grain ships sailing from Cyprus to Byzantium, asking them to deliver the corn and promising that when it was weighed in Constantinople, no one would be found lacking. The sailors suspected it was an illusion and kept to their old course, but when a storm came up, the sailors called for Nicholas' help until the danger stopped. Then the ships came ashore to unload their cargo, and the sailors went to worship Nicholas' tomb. More or less, it's the same story. In Jacopo da Varagine, the ships are going from where is it? They're bound to Alexandria, while in the original, in the first version, they are bound to Constantinople. This painting, the painting by Ambrogio Lorenzetti, is remarkable for the realism of the scene, in which 14th century cargo vessels are depicted with extreme care. Notice the 2 angels above. I spoke about it before. The illusionistic ability and the memorable natural sea landscape in Ambrogio Lorenzetti's work will leave a long-lasting impression, even in works of art of the following century. We can appreciate this in much later works. The one on the right by Beato Angelico. They have very punctual references to the original prototype. But in stark comparison with the wealth of incidental technological detail visible in Western iconographical sources, Byzantine art keeps proposing small, shallow draught vessels, only sometimes depicted with some attention to detail. These ones I'm showing you are the good ones. These are less good. More often, ships that show up in iconography are just marginally better than banana boats. With all due respect. The vast majority of vessels in Byzantine art are Latiniers with a triangular sail. The main advantage of the Latinier was that it could sail closer to the wind, and that in a sudden storm the sail could be deactivated quickly. The square rig, like in the ship on the left, required a dramatically smaller crew, but could not sail as close to the wind and appears very rarely in Orthodox iconographical sources. In San Nikolaos Orphanos in Thessaloniki, there's a unique scene. We can see it on the left, and we can appreciate there are two boats actually. The one that is completely visible shows the usual motive of the saint chasing the devils from the sails, from the mast. Now, of course, the devils have disappeared, but they are around here. While on the right, we can only see a part of the rigging of a second boat, and only the caption above, which is this one, but I rewrote it in order to be more visible, with the word Seton, allows us to understand that this is a scene depicting the miracle of the corn, with the saint persuading the captain to hand over the ship's cargoes. The saint is speaking probably here with the captain that went lost. This particular scene is, to my knowledge, the only one preserved, albeit partially, of the miracle of the corn in Byzantine art. There are no other such scenes. But Saint Demetrius performed a similar service for the city of Thessaloniki, appearing to the captain of a ship while he was asleep and ordering him to deliver his cargo of corn to the starving city of Thessaloniki. As far as I know, this is also a seldom represented miracle. It appears only in the fresco cycle of Deshani Monastery and in the as yet unpublished Church of Saint Demetrius in Veles, in northern Macedonia. This is it. Now, as far as Western art is concerned, the ship illustrations of good quality start to appear in a series of secular illuminated manuscripts produced in Crusader Acre in the second part of the 13th century, then in Venice and other Italian nautical republics. France and the Iberic Peninsula also produced graphic material of relevant interest. I put on the left, an illumination from the Acre School, the so-called, and on the right something coming from Venice. Additional non-iconographic sources about ship construction and technology include contracts for construction and leasing, mostly the result of Italian ports supplying crusaders with the vessels in the 13th century, and later on chartering contracts originating in Genoa, Venice, but also in Crete and other Aegean ports. Such material can be supplemented with the results of nautical archaeology and with the first treatises on shipbuilding produced in the 15th century. Unfortunately, the limited time available does not allow me to show you some of this interesting text. Sailing ships could have 2, 3, or 4 decks, so 2 seems to have been the most common. The design did not vary substantially among the three main sizes of sailing ships. The hulls were rounded and the vessels carried 2 side rudders, like here and like in all the other images we saw, at the stern. From the 13th century onward, the sailing ships typically carried 2 masts. In the beginning, there's only one, and the forward masts counted forward, and each mast had a lateen sail, a triangular sail, as we can see here. Now, as I attribute to our guests, as I have said before, the hull of boats in Byzantine art usually is that of a simple row boat, only occasionally having a high curved bow or stern. In Bojana, we have exactly this. It's a rare case of a raised poop adorned with the shields. And this detail, together with the crow's nest on top of the mast, probably reflects Western iconographic influence. In rare cases, Orthodox art represents larger vessels with a raised stern, like in the West, and castle, multiple decks, and masts, like in these 2 unpublished images, so don't copy them. While images, too late. While images coming, of course nobody cares, but okay. I try to give some importance to this. While images coming from the Levant do not usually offer many material data, Western art is consistently providing a remarkable amount of information, sometimes even in a single work of art like this one. It is worth to mention how the convoy is composed in Ambrogio Lorenzetti. We have 5 ships composing the convoy, and this is according to the Encomium Methodi, written around the year 860, while the Legenda Aurea of Jacopo da Varagine does not specify the number of the corn ships involved in the miracle. It looks as if Lorenzetti had access to other older sources besides the Legenda Aurea. Notice how these boats change sail position as they maneuver to enter port. It's like they are starting from the bottom of the sea and they are closing to the port. And while they close, they are cutting speed and changing sails. In Latiners, in order to change the sail, the yard, this one, had to be carried over the masthead with a complex operation that I am showing here, involving a lot of manpower. I'm getting close to the end. Lorenzetti provides solid documentary evidence about naval heraldry. I will spare you this and go to the end. The question I always end up asking myself when I look at the Byzantine works of art, however, is the following. Why Orthodox artists, while perfectly capable of reproducing tangible data and technical aspects of everyday life, usually avoid doing so? One possible answer is that showing interest in observing the world, reproducing it faithfully in images, seeking novel experience or acquiring knowledge for its own sake was frowned upon. Curiosity was regarded as morally useless, contributing nothing to the ultimate goal of human progress toward heavenly wisdom. Early medieval Christianity had an ambiguous relationship with the maritime environment. Sea and ships were usually seen from a negative perspective, and especially the open sea represented chaos and uncontrollable power and hostile environment. The ship, in saving people from the terrible sea, was a positive symbol of the church, a safe refuge from the world. Otherwise, on the other side, from the 12th century onward in the West, the increasing material success of medieval seafaring communities allowed the creation of a new ship imagery that attributed the vessels with stronger primary qualities such as loyalty, competence, and trust, while the magnificent boats of Ambrogio Lorenzetti and his contemporary, which is producing an even better image of a ship, Giovanni di Balduccio here, are new symbols of success and status, of innovation and imagination, all connected with a more scientific, naturalistic attitude. The Byzantine preferred to stick to the traditional point of view of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, and for sticking to the time. So we now can proceed to the discussion. Are there any questions for Mrs. Rusova's presentation about the revetments from the icons of Nseber? I must say it's very nice how you present this, the complication of simple thing like that, the revetment of an icon, but it goes over and it has different layers and layers. This is very, very nice. Thank you for this. Please. Professor, proceed, please.
Thank you very much for this very informative communication. I would like to ask you, you proposed probably 3 possibilities, either Constantinople, Thessaloniki, or Nseber. Would you are for one of them or not?
It's a little bit difficult because we have no exactly parallel. There are many similarities with the revetments from Ohrid, which has proven us Constantinople. The relations between Alexandria and Constantinople are very close, but also with Thessaloniki. There are relations, and with Montatos, from where there are many from the same time silver eventments. It's very difficult, but I suppose that it's very possible to have a goldsmith atelier in situ in Mesembria, because as was wrote in some of the inscriptions, the same Uncle Samuel of the Tsar donated also a golden gospel, silver putirium, etc., silver and gold church plates. Maybe it's very possible. Maybe in Ternopil also there was an atelier, goldsmith atelier. Here in this facility, I suppose that it's very possible to be in situ in Mesembria, some atelier.
Do you find any similarities with Mount Athos production?
Yes,
With the same
also
period?
similarities, but
Yeah.
not identities.
Okay. Thank you.
As ornaments, as technique, etc.
Sorry, did you manage to take off the cover from the first side?
Yes, from the Odigitria. I don't know, there is no restoration of the painting, and the icon is in possession of the National Archaeological Museum. And for this museum, the most important is the inscriptions as a historical evidence, not this icon from the aesthetic side. And they are not make a relayer of the painting, because the faces are from 18th century. There are many icons from the Black Sea coast are repainted in the same period from the same Zograph atelier. And in National Gallery, we related some of the icons, and there are some marvelous medieval paintings from different periods, but there is no restoration of the painting, and I don't know what is under the silver cover of this so famous icon.
Anything else? Yes, please. Mr. Viteliotis.
About the worldwide peoples, the icon, is it written on the icon, or is it a later popular appellation?
Yes, I will answer immediately. It's very interesting because the epithet was on the icon and on the revestment also, because very often that is on the wooden icon, because of it is so very difficult to make it from silver. The epithet we have 2 times, on the icon and on the silver revestment. And this is one of the earliest examples of the Holy Virgin with the same epithet of Gorgonic Rose.
Yes, and I didn't know it when I published the icon of world people, which is probably late 14th century in Cairo.
Yes.
And I didn't know this. I have to add it in.
Yes, the icon is very famous, and it is in the crypt in the center of the exposition, and it is this icon was published from the beginning of 20th century.
It had completely escaped from my attention. There are only 2 churches in the late Byzantine period. There are only 2 churches in the sources dedicated to the people. One in Constantinople, one in Thessaloniki. There's also the Gorgopicos in Athens, but then in that church, we are not sure if this epithet was attributed to that chapel, besides the cathedral, since the beginning, or it was a later epithet. So we are not sure about the Byzantine Gorgopicos. There are only 2 churches. So it's very important that there is
It's very rare epithet, and this example from assembly, because the painting is possible to be end of 13th century or 14th till 1340s.
So
It is one of the earliest examples of this epithet.
Yes, so it's more ancient than the icon of Kairos. The icon of Kairos is of the end of the, I think, 14th century.
It's the earlier. Yes, thank you.
Okay, something else? Okay, we can proceed to the second presentation. I must say it was very elucidating for how the relics can become political instruments or financial instruments for the patriarchate. This was very, very nice, and I thank you for this nice view. Please, any questions? Again, Mr. Tellots, please.
So, it's very interesting that there is often a confusion in iconography and also in cult between the Semparaschieva de Martyr and Semparaschieva of the Privates. In the Greek Orthodox Church, there is a veneration, especially for Semparaschieva de Martyr, with its feast day it's in July 26, but it seems that it's a very, very later liturgical edition, because in the Byzantine hymnology there is no feast day of Saint Paraschieva de Martyr 26 July. On the contrary, even there is no mention of Saint Paraschieva of Rome, it's fictitious. But on the contrary, there is a Saint Paraschieva Nomazia Minor for Martyr in October 18th. And it seems that it is the real Martyr Saint Paraschieva. So it was a change of the feast day, which occurred very later. I mean, perhaps after 16th century. But in the iconography of Saint Paraschieva with Bates, she holds she holds a cross, which is the attribute of a martyr, not of a holy woman that was an ascetic. So my question is there any distinction between Saint Paraschieva of Iconium as in the Slavic countries and Saint Paraschieva of Epiphates in epithets or in the names or in iconography? Iconography, yes, I suppose without the iconography, I mean the portrait of the saint. Is there any distinction?
Yes, thank you for the question. The confusion is obvious because of three saints and many contamination, and in terms of iconography, even the Polish Ruthenian icons I have shown show the portrait in the middle in a martyr-like manner. So even in these icons, some influence is discernible. In my research, I always avoided the portraits. So I never paid full attention to the iconic images because I was always more interested in the narrative scenes.
But how they call it?
Tyrnovska, Petka, Saint Petka, or Saint Petka Tyrnovska in the inscription. So it's clear.
The other one, Petka.
Petka, yes, sometimes, but she's less represented in Moldavian art, for instance, than the Serbian one. Okay.
Just for a small information, in Pendeli near Athens, they have erected a church in Saint Paraschieva dedicated to both of them. I mean, with two altars. Saint Paraschieva de Martyr, 26 July, Saint Paraschieva of Epiphates in late October. So it's.
I find it great, really.
Yeah.
This is fair.
In Bucharest, such a case, but not with two altars, but it's dedicated to the both. Yes, and they are represented in 18th century church, but they are represented on the facade, two icons.
This is a contemporary church.
Yeah, also Babuin hinted that there are two Saint Nicolases. One has to do some. These things were happening in the church. Who would expect that they would confuse things and don't know who is who? And Saint Theodores are also two, but it's actually one.
In terms of liturgical texts and so on, things are even more complicated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other question for Mrs. Firia? Yes, Mr. Olar. We were expecting you.
I understand correctly, you assume that Balaam was the one who kind of indicated to Montpellier what to, or how to.
It's always like this.
Okay, do we know something about Balaam's sources? Because, okay, it's in Sternovo, but at the same time we had Greek version of Matthäus Miraeon, for example?
Yes, but they are, yes, maybe. In the version you're referring to, the Greek one, the transfers to Vidin, for instance, and to Belgrade are completely obliterated. So yes, I think it works as a source, probably. It works as a source, but the problem is to date it exactly. Anyway, it is earlier than the engraving, I think. The writing, earlier, the writing.
I'm curious, I have no idea.
I read the text, it doesn't say, it's, actually this is a very good suggestion, thank you very much. They relate. He speaks of 3 translations, and the 3 are to be found in the engraving, in the image. Right. Thank you.
Any other question? If not, let us proceed to the last presentation of Andrea Babuin about St. Nicholas and the miracle of the wheat. Are there any questions? He demonstrated the differences between Eastern and Western art. It's his duty, it appears. But any questions? Please.
Professor Babuin, I would like to ask you about the church St. Demetrius in Venice. Can you give some information? And this thing, it was there was a cycle of the St. Nicholas with there.
When I saw it,
St. Demetrius, not St. Nicholas.
it was under restoration, so not much was visible. But probably knows.
If I may intervene, in the last volume of Patrimonium, yeah, there is an article about it.
By my colleagues, Dr. Nikolsky, art historian, and
Yes.
restorator. The conservation is led by National Conservation Center, and they were under the layer of 19th century. So it is a new discovery. Even the portrait of the leader, Leon Kotanitzazoni, and the year, yes, we have the year also. So my colleague Darko Nikolsky published an article now in Patrimonium. It is already available. You can see it and read it. And I'm glad that I made the drawings for the theater and some of the scenes, including this one of the cycle of St. Demetrius, but that will publish another article about the cycle.
Yeah, we should stress.
For your answer, for your great work in the church.
We should stress that the work done on St. Demetrius is very good, and Darko Nikolovsky is a very precise person, very good scholar, and it's a shame we don't have him with us more often. I take this chance to say this. But yeah, he always was welcoming us in St. Demetrius, showing us all the new findings, asking for help, asking for opinions, which is very rare and needed in our field.
There was no discovery like that for decades, so we're proud of that.
Anything else on Mr. Babuin's presentation? Nothing. Okay, we can now have our kind of 9-minute delayed break, and we can be back after the coffee. Thank you all.